we are not just concerned about the advanced nations, but we are more concerned about the underdeveloped nations. For a particular governance framework to set in and take place, you need to see that the leadership comes in action. We don't want sustainability just to be a theoretical part of anybody's life. We want sustainability to be practiced in each and every walk of life. Good morning and welcome to the first session in Chapter 5, Unit 4, second semester BBA Sustainable Development, where we are going to speak about Sustainable Development Goals, governance and policy. When we talk about the word governance itself, that talks about some framework, how we need to build that framework in order to achieve the sustainable goals. Now let's talk about this. The Sustainable Development Goals is a roadmap that is being set for the better world. So we all know that at one corner of the world, we are still fighting to eradicate poverty, hunger, unemployment, quality of life, corruption, so many factors that are bothering this world. But the other side, we are talking about countries which are just going on higher scales of GDP, better standards of quality, better standards in terms of infrastructure, and a greater living place altogether. Now, when we talk about all these factors, what does the world want in future? Our generations want equality. We want to see that each and every person gets a chance to live a life of his own choice. We don't want a system that is going to be dominated by any kind of activity that would lead to the disruption of life. So what we want is that we want to reduce the gender equality in terms of the factors of sustainable goals where we're talking about, and then we want this planet to be for everybody, the well-being. Now, instead, where there are decent jobs available, infrastructure is available, clean oceans, energy, responsible consumption and production, water, sanitation, quality education, these have become the standards in terms of measuring for a good life. So down the road, what we are interested upon, what we are really looking is we want to have a system where the quality of life is measured not in terms of monetary value, but it is measured in terms of the standards of living, accessibility to all the facilities, good infrastructure, and good living conditions. Now, advancing on the SDG represents a complex governance challenge. Now, what is that governance challenge that we are talking about? The indivisible, interdependent, and the intergenerational nature of SDG implies the need for the government to rethink their organization and working methods. Some years back, we thought that it is not our problem. It is not our need. It is not the thought process that we need to build upon. But today, the world has started thinking as a common place together. We are all interdependent for each and every activities that happens through our walk of life. So what is happening here for government as well as for private organizations is that they need to join hands together, they need to work as a team, and they need to take it forward as a factor. So at some point down the lane, it is not going to be that easy for the governments to just take it up and say that, yes, this is going to happen. We are going to understand this factor very clearly by stating the fact that we are all interdependent. We are all collaborative in terms of thinking, in terms of working, and in terms of putting the action together. There might be a lot of obstacles that we have to overcome traditionally, and there are a lot of factors that we have to see it. Why? Because we are not just concerned about the advanced nations, but we are more concerned about the underdeveloped nations. We still talk about poverty at many parts of this world. We don't want that poverty to be a subject, to be a word that has to come for the future generation. They do not have to know about it. So what is our ideology altogether is that we want the government to get on to the approach of taking the problem as a complete set and delivering a unified solution for this world. We want the entire system to be so well built that we are able to address the problem univocally and try to get a system in place. So that's where we are looking in for this governance practice. The next one, for example, the SDGs are not yet integrated in the governance mechanisms. That's very, very important for us. And there are many times where we will be able to feel that there's a frequent gap in leadership skills and competencies that are required for such a cross-cutting agenda. Nevertheless, when we have to talk about our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, he has created such a good image as a leader across the globe. He has been able to project himself not only a leader for the nation, but for a leader for the globe. Because his ideology, his vision has been in such a manner that he has been trying to create the world as an interconnected place. Now, that is not true with every other leader. Probably a person has got the skill over a period of time, but not every leader across this world would be respected on the same platform, would be treated on the same methodology altogether. So for a particular governance framework to set in and take place, you need to see that the leadership comes in action, which means to say that every leader across this globe need to think on the same platform, on the same line, so that we are able to achieve what has been spoken about as the Sustainable Development Goal. Second thing is that when you are on the stage of monitoring and evaluating a system, that might be too early to talk about as of right now, but then what is in the ground reality is that you need to build in a system that is able to evaluate each and every action at every stage. And that's how the entire system can come into place, and we can start seeing that each and every goal is translated into action. That's very much important for us. Another challenge is to ensure that the domestic policies also contribute to the global sustainability while avoiding the negative economic and social environmental externalities. Now, we are not interested in creating a system that can spell negativity into the economic zone. We don't want to have a company which is going to pollute, but at the same time, it's going to generate revenue. I'm not going to go on that phase and say that because it is generating money, let's continue with that system. No, I want an system, I want an industry which will be able to generate a futuristic value in terms of quality of life and also provide job security, create a social friendly environment for the entire system. So I'm more interested in building up this particular activity. The next thing is that countries are making considerable effort to meet these challenges, no doubt about it, and the progress has been made in many areas. Yet, when we talk about the stronger partnerships and platform needed where countries can come together, share their best practices, learn from each other's experience and the governance in terms of SDGs. Now, let me take the example of Sweden as a country here. Sweden, Norway, probably Denmark. These are some of the countries which I would like to put in as an example here. Why? Because these countries have gone ahead in terms of the digital quality of life. They've gone ahead in terms of building a very, very sustainable environment for their citizens, and they've also stood as an example for the higher standards of quality of living. Now, probably by tying up with these countries, India can also learn what are the best practices that we can follow in order to make our country a better nation, a better sustainable, goal-oriented nation. And that's what we want to see here. We want that the sustainability should not be taken just as an exercise. We don't want sustainability just to be a theoretical part of anybody's life. We want sustainability to be practiced in each and every walk of life. We want sustainability to become a habit in whichever area, in whichever sector we are working for. Followed by, we want to start with certain steps. We want to go with certain ideology. So the first step here is that build strong, inclusive political commitment and leadership. Now, for example, sun is the biggest source of energy. We know that solar energy is one thing that has been spoken about across the globe. And using the solar energy, the wind power, water cycle photosynthesis, we can create a common pool of energy which we can cook food and which can, the solar energy concept can be reinvested, harvested in so many areas so that we are able to generate lot of beneficial activities altogether. Followed by, we want to implement and communicate the long-term strategic vision. Now, what is that long-term strategic vision? Let me just come over there. In the year 2030 agenda, which was developed by the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, what we have been coming across is that to implement for the today, but the benefit is for the future generation. So the long-term vision and planning horizons are essential for supporting the future needs. So when I make this statement, what I'm trying to say here is that the action that you are going to take today will be the future for the generations to come and see. Now, one side, when we talk about history, we also need to understand the mistakes that have been done in the pages of history are still being reflected in today's life. We don't want these mistakes to be reflected in the future generation. We want the system to be clean. We want the system to be even more built in such a manner that all our future generation people are able to get the best out of it. So we want to build in a long-term vision. We want to have a long-term system that is able to generate success. Followed by the step 2, where we are going to define, implement, and communicate the long-term vision. So yes, we are going to have committed nations achieving sustainable goal and development as the core practice here, the dimensions of social, economic, political integration factor, and the most important thing, the policy integration is essential for balancing often divergent economic scales, social and environmental policies, priorities that are coming up. And in terms of maximizing synergies and minimizing trade-offs in all stages of policy making process. Why? Because these things are going to create a very big impact in our thinking process, and this is how it is going to come into picture. Followed by the integrated nature of SDGs require mechanisms for policy, institutional coordination at multiple levels. Given the potential of tensions among the diverse interest on economic, social, environmental issues, appropriate coordinations mechanisms are needed to anticipate, manage, and resolve the conflicts, inconsistencies that we are talking about between the policies. So somewhere down the lane, let me tell you, when I talk about this word called as the coordinated approach, I want each and every government to think for some time. Why? Because whenever we are creating a policy, we might be right from our standpoint. From an Indian economic scenario, yes, whatever we are talking is quite valuable, might be quite to the appropriate issue, but that might not be applicable to Singapore or to Dubai or to Vietnam or Philippines altogether. So when we are going to set our agenda on a global platform, we need to see that all the interests, all the issues are addressed collectively and everybody is on the same page in terms of understanding the sustainability activity. Followed by, we ensure that the whole of government coordination approach. Now, this is very, very important. I don't want the government to just to do a handoff and say that, yes, we have completed our role or task. What I want is that all the key stakeholders, including the ministries, public sector, and the private sector, should join hand to hand and see that the program is completed stage by stage till the end. So at the end of the day, what we want to see is the responsibility and resources of the SDG implementation. So somewhere down the lane, when people come back and say that the government has taken this task and they have completed it to the best level as far as possible, and that's what people will be interested in you. And that's where people will start thinking about how to make this even more efficient, how to make this even more stronger altogether. Now, for example, when you're working with the subnational levels, the 2030 agenda that tells very, very clearly here that at any given point of time, whenever we are talking about this factor, the 25% or the entire policy is more concentrated at the national level, but the 65% of the targets that we are talking about are more at the subnational level. So what is going to happen is that each and every district, each and every government has to think about it, has to work upon it, and has to build in a system in such a way that it is more on a coordinated basis at any given point of time. Followed by engage a wider range of stakeholders. Everybody in this will have to start working in a collaborative manner. They should join hands together. They should understand what it is going on. They should understand what is the difference, where it is strongly rooted in different perceptions and challenges, priorities of transitioning towards a sustainable development, which is also very, very mandatory, important, and needed at any given point of time. So at one juncture, I would definitely say that though the challenges are different, though the ideologies are different, though the perceptions are different, but then for every stakeholder, what we are seeing here is that We are a part of a system that's going to create something new, something better for tomorrow. So that's why we want the policies to be as simple as possible, accessible, and we need to create a better future keeping in mind. Now, when we want to engage them, we have to give a coherent implementation. We want to give the stakeholders a proper ideology to identify the challenge, priorities, and to develop the laws, regulations, actions, and policies, mobilize the resources, tell them how it is needed, all those factors in terms to understand and attain the sustainable development. With that, I come to the end of today's session. I hope and believe that all the things that we have spoken in this session, both in terms of theory as well as in practical, would be useful for you in the coming sessions as well as in the coming classes. In the upcoming session, we are going to talk more about the SDG in terms of the renewable energy and the other factors of the design, and we are going to give a lot of importance to the sustainable development goals. But before that, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.